The legendary tier Italian cruiser Venezia got a buff in the June 2026 update, but before we talk about the details of the buff, which are quite sparse, let me explain to you briefly why I am choosing to run SAP on the Venezia instead of HE, because it was both the HE shells and the SAP that got an indirect buff, in a way. Now, we come around this island here, and what do we find but an enemy Shimakaze on full HP? Take aim and fire. The Shimakaze is no longer on full HP. That was a devastating strike with the sap. It's possible you could do that with the Venezia's HE, but I think the sap is much more reliable for that. And that kind of ability to deal devastating damage to destroyers is, I think, one of the things that sets the Italian cruiser line apart when you choose to play it with sap. Anyway, I've got a full match for you here now. As you can see, it's not a 9v9, and I don't know that it's because anybody turned off crossplay. That could be the reason. But there's also two legendary carriers, of course. They're both Manfred von Richthofen, and I think probably both of these CV players waited in the queue for a long time to play their new CV, and the matchmaker, I guess, couldn't handle that, so it put us in, I think, a 7v7 instead of a 9v9. It's not ideal, of course, but in the shorter game formats, it is easier for one player to have an outsized impact on the battle. So I suppose there's that, and I think this is a decent battle as far as Venezia is concerned. Anyway, this ship got a buff. I don't really know why that was. I don't think it necessarily needed a buff. But in the June 2026 update, the main battery HE and SAP shell grouping was increased by 2.4%. So the sigma went from 2.05 to 2.1. A little bit more accuracy, which is nice, especially if you're going to be shooting SAP. You need it to hit the parts of the ship you're aiming at in order for it to pen. And then the maximum AP shell damage got buffed from 4,800 to 51. Maximum HE, 2,900 to 3,300. And then the main battery reload with the SAP got buffed by 1 second, 21 to 20 seconds. Same thing with the main battery firing HE, 19 seconds to 18 seconds. Well, in this battle, we're running a free-to-play commander. I'll show you the build here in a moment. I think we're going to take a shot at this Borgonia, though. Let's see how that goes. And the shot is out. You can see the reload is less than 20 seconds because of the build. And the results are pretty good, 10k on the Borgonia there. And we managed to avoid most of the return fire. I suppose Rhode Island is coming around the corner as well. We've got torpedoes headed toward him. I think Borgonia temporarily broke one of our guns, and luckily Rhode Island is shooting HE as far as I can tell. Even if he did shoot AP, I think we're reasonably well protected against that. Anyway, as we begin to kite away and see whether these slow Italian sea mines will hit the Rhode Island, which I think one of them looks like it's going to. And yeah, there it goes, with a flood too, and another 11,000 damage. Doesn't seem like he's got DCP off cooldown, probably because of the shots from the friendly cruiser. Anyway, as we shoot here against the Rhode Island, I will show you the commander build. It is Francesco Mimbelli with Kuznetsov and Makawa as his two inspirations. A little bit of extra range and a little bit of extra concealment. I think that is a decent free-to-play build to play on this thing, and it mostly addresses the main problem, I suppose, with the Venezia, which is even after this reload buff, the reload time is pretty long. With Mimbelli at the helm and with the reload mod in the 4th slot, the main battery reload on these Venezia guns is 17 seconds. Now that's quite a long time, but there are 15 sap-slinging guns here. And if you consider some other heavy cruisers, maybe at lower tiers, like a Tago, for example, I'm pretty sure it has close to a 17-second reload on its HE. So this isn't totally out of line with certain heavy cruisers. Now, I think there's probably a lot of people, though, who would want to play the Venezia with HE, because SAP is maybe harder to use, maybe does a little bit less damage since it doesn't light fires. And I suppose the Venezia could be a good fire spammer, but as far as HE versus SAP is concerned, I would always go for the SAP on these Italian cruisers. It's their calling card that makes them unique, I suppose, along with a rolling smoke screen. And if you wanted an HE spamming cruiser pretty similar to Venezia, well, Zhao exists. And as far as Zhao is concerned, its reload time on its 12 guns is quite a bit shorter, 11 and a half seconds versus, I think, Venezia's base 19-second reload with its HE. And now, of course, Venezia's HE has been buffed to a maximum damage of 3,300, which is really close to Zhao, by the way. Zhao's maximum HE shell damage is 3,400, 100 points higher. And Zhao boasts a 19% base fire chance, although on whatever build I'm running with it, it has a 22% fire chance. If we compare that to Venezia's HE numbers, then what we'll find is on Venezia's 15 guns, the HE does 3,300 damage, and the base fire chance is 15%. So Zhao is better in the HE department in every respect, except for the number of guns. You have a much higher fire chance at base, and you have slightly better HE shell damage on top of that. Of course, if you build for HE damage on the Zhao, you can increase that with the use of certain commander skills, and you can even increase the fire chance. The bottom line is that Zhao is the ship that you would want, I think, if your goal is to use a heavy cruiser to spam HE at your targets. There's pretty much nothing better than Zhao in that department at the legendary tier, at least in terms of comparable cruisers like this. Venezia, on the other hand, since it has the SAP, and since alternatives like Zhao exist with similar, albeit better, HE parameters, I would never run HE on the Venezia, or on the Brindisi, or the other Italian cruisers of the line. Just go with the SAP. And at this point in the battle, we've done 86,000 damage. We've eliminated one battleship, which we didn't get the kill on. We got the Fist. And of course, the blue team has lost a battleship and a destroyer. All of a sudden, we're alone on this flank versus, I think, 3 out of 6 of the remaining enemy ships. There's a battleship, a cruiser, a destroyer, even the CV is lurking around there somewhere. And there's one battleship way in the enemy spawn between the Bravo and Charlie caps. Of course, since we're alone here, we don't want to necessarily go 1v1 versus this Borgonia and have all his teammates shoot us. Plus, our destroyer is headed for the center, so we might as well follow him to benefit from his spotting and also to potentially shoot at any enemy destroyer he might spot. There are still 2 floating, and we're going to need to eliminate them if we want to win this battle. Borgonia is, I think, a good target for the Venezia's SAP, by the way. I think our initial salvo with the SAP against him did 10k. That is, of course, going to fall off quickly as parts of his ship get saturated. And somewhere along the way, we did permanently lose a gun, so we don't even get to see the full firepower of Venezia for the remainder of the game. By the way, Wargaming, in the next update, it would be fantastic if you could eliminate the permanently destroyed modules. I don't think any module, from main battery guns to torpedoes to secondaries to anti-aircraft guns, should be allowed to be permanently disabled for the duration of the battle. It's just not fun, and I think you could still achieve the same sort of tactical achievement if you could merely temporarily knock out the modules, and let's say they stayed knocked out for, I don't know, 30, 40 seconds before they came back online. That way, you know, you could still aim at people's guns, you could disable them so they can't shoot at you temporarily, and then eventually they'll come back and they'd be able to continue participating in the battle with their full firepower. That would be a fantastic quality of life change. If you could do that in the next update, Wargaming, I would appreciate it. Anyway, Borgonia has been eliminated. That just leaves the Conqueror, the Napoli, the last remaining enemy DD, and the CV left. And of course, Conqueror is another good target for the Venezia Sap, despite the fact that that salvo doesn't deal much damage there. The Venezia's sap, of course, enjoys the improved penetration angles of sap, which means it's got a 70-degree minimum ricochet angle and an 80-degree guaranteed ricochet angle. Sap does 5,200 damage, and it pens 54 millimeters of armor. So targets like the Conqueror and the Borgonia, both of which are essentially coated in 32 everywhere, are especially vulnerable to sap penetrations. And of course, sap never overpens. It's always a full penetration, a shatter, or occasionally a ricochet. Using the final smoke screen here of the Venezia in this battle as the Conqueror goes down, leaving only the Napoli and the CV and the last remaining enemy DD left alive. I think the CV is actually sailing somewhere inside of the Alpha Cap too, or sailing toward it. Yeah, no, he's directly inside of it. We're going to want to go after him. Napoli was hot on our case. We're going to use this island potentially to turn around. I don't think we have to. Actually, I wish we had the AP chambered here. In fact, it would be nice if there were some sort of cruiser commander with a skill similar to the Azerlane Dunkirk commander for the French battleships. One that could allow you to instantly switch from SAP to AP. That way, when cruisers give you a broadside like that, you could take advantage of it and potentially hit the Citadel. I don't think, unfortunately, the Venezia's SAP is going to be citadeling any other cruiser. You would need larger guns like you find on the Italian battleship Lauria to get citadels on things like Minotaur or Brisbane or Colbert, I think, as well. Probably Smolensk, too. Anyway, we're able to take out the Napoli with, I think, the sap there. That's our second kill of the game. 145,000 damage done. All that's left is the CV and the DD. Enemy team has 2 out of 3 of the caps, so we're going to have to go into Bravo and take that. I think the only real threat against us is the enemy destroyer. I suppose Manfred von Richthofen could come in here with his torpedoes or his AP bombs and deal some damage to us, but not likely if we're going to be able to sink him. And of course, we've lost vision, but that's just because our friendly DD is behind an island. He's not now. He's able to reveal the Manfred von Richthofen, and I suppose that DD on our team is not going to be taking any engagements with the red one. He's got a sliver of health left, and I believe the red DD is a Shimakaze. Even a Shimakaze that chooses to fire its guns, at least, would be able to eliminate that destroyer in one little salvo, so I think it's a good thing that he just provides spotting for the Richthofen. We'll shoot at him. He's got torpedoes on the way. You would think, too, that the Venezia would be able to maybe, I don't know, citadel the enemy carrier with its AP, but no, we'll get 3 shatters off either its belt armor or its torpedo armor. I'm not sure what that was, but barely any damage on Manfred von Richthofen. I think the battleship takes him out. And of course, the battleship looks like he's in prime position to eat a face full of Shimakaze torpedoes. I don't think he's going to sink, though. Maybe he dodges them, so good for him. We're going to get into the cap along with him. Friendly destroyer still hanging out somewhere in the back, but I think the enemy Shimakaze was last spotted on the other side of this capture circle. He's revealing us now, of course, or spotting us. I don't know quite where he is, but I don't think he is in a position where he's going to make a beeline for the Charlie cap. That'd be the big problem here. We are ahead of the enemy team on points, of course, but a couple Shima torps probably could send this friendly battleship back to port. One Shima shell could send the destroyer back to port, and it's not like the Venezia, for its part, has great torpedo-resisting abilities either. It's got 28% torpedo damage reduction, and we've got 28,000 HP. I think 2 Shima torps is going to be all it takes. And of course, we're closest to the Shima now. Friendly battleship is pinging where he suspects the Shima to be, and I think he's actually correct. Shima's probably somewhere to the right-hand side of the screen right now. I was thinking maybe between these islands. But the idea here, of course, when you don't have a ship with sonar that can spot the torpedoes incoming, is just to change your course and speed unpredictably. When it comes to Shimikazes, their torpedoes are spotted pretty far away from your ship, I think at 1.7 km, and it seems to me like they tend to spread out relative to other torpedoes. So, as long as you see them and you have an idea of where they're coming from, it's easy to avoid most, if not all of them in most cases. Just unpredictably change your course, and all of a sudden it becomes much more difficult for the enemy DD player. And if we can spot him, well, you saw what happened in that initial clip against that full HP enemy Shimikaze. This one would stand probably no chance. He does manage to get one torpedo on us, enough to remove about half of our remaining HP. Second one would undoubtedly take us out, but we dodge it. And the friendly DD does his job, I suppose. He gets into the other remaining cap. There's no danger that we're going to lose this battle unless Shimikaze can sink all three of us, which he can't, but he is prolonging the inevitable until ultimately he decides to shoot his main battery guns at the last possible moment and reveal himself. How cheeky of him. We don't get the kill, of course, but we do get the win, and I'd say a decent battle in Venezia. Good XP, 3,200. I suppose some of that would come from a couple of planes being shot down, but not really. And I think the Venezia is a very good cruiser. I don't really think it needed the buff, but I'd say the buff makes it marginally better. And if you're going to play this thing, well, I'd recommend playing it with SAP. But do whatever you want. You can use HE if you want to. I just think there are better choices. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye.